When you think of the first London wave of punk, most minds go to The Damned, the Sex Pistols, and The Clash. But just as essentially, there was also X-Ray Spex. They stood out, not least because of their saxophonist, and the addition of reggae, pop, and electronic flourishes to their version of punk. Contrasting the influx of white boys with guitars, the Spex lead singer was Polly Styrene, a woman of colour, 4'5", with braces on her teeth, and varyingly dressed in a neon bin bag or as a toy soldier. Unfounded rumours circulated about her being a trained opera singer, yet her forceful vocal acted as a shout-along rallying cry to all that heard her. Their legacy all started with their crucial debut single, an increasingly evident entry for the most influential punk 7-inch ever. This is New British Canon, and this is the story of O Bondage, Up Yours.
Hi there, Mrs. Smith.
X-Ray Spex began with one Marion Elliott Said. Born in 1957 to a Somalian father and Scottish-Irish mother, Elliott grew up in Brixton in London. Living as a mixed-race individual in 1970s Britain proved taxing, with Elliott feeling she never truly fit in anywhere. It's always worse when you're a kid, and I used to get it from both sides. I got it most from the black kids, especially when I was 14, and really felt black, wearing my hair in dreadlocks and that, wanting to be black, but the black kids just took the piss out of me. In an act of youthful defiance, at the age of 15 she fled home with a mere £3 in her pocket to become a hippie. She travelled the country, becoming a vegetarian, hitchhiking to free music festivals, and crashing in squats. A year later she returned home, but only after having jabbed herself with a rusty nail after a walk in a stream, and needed to be treated for septicemia. Gaining confidence from her lost year, she decided she wanted to get into pop music. After some session work during the mid-70s, she released her first single, Silly Billy, in April 1976, under the name Marie Elliott on Donna Summer's GTO label.
Oh, Billy, you're silly to mess with this filly.
A bouncy bubblegum reggae tune, it didn't chart, but it did display her impressive vocals and led her to want to create something that was entirely her own. Though she enjoyed the music of Janis Joplin, Tina Turner, and reggae, her future direction was elusive. That was until, while in Hastings for her 19th birthday, she took a chance on seeing a London band with a provocative name. That band was the Sex Pistols. At the time, the Pistols were merely support for obscure Welsh metal act, Budgie. They were mostly playing ramshackle covers, and there was barely anyone there. They were just a bunch of kids playing music with no pretensions of professionalism. But that was key. Like many others after first seeing the Sex Pistols, Elliott was hooked, and realised she could do this too. That's why I formed X-Ray Spex. I wanted my music more raw. I was younger than the session musicians I was working with, and wanted 3-minute songs, quick, fast and short. Returning to London, Elliott placed an ad in Melody Maker and the NME asking for young punks who want to stick it together. First through the door and into this new group were Paul Dean on bass, Jack Stafford aka Jack Airport on guitar, Big Paul BP Herding on drums, and in what was an innovative move for a punk group, Susan Whitby aka Laura Logic on saxophone. The band were named after the plastic novelties that Elliott had seen advertised in the back of comic books. But Elliott herself needed a Johnny Rotten style alias.
I chose the name polystyrene because it's a lightweight disposable product.
Because I thought it was a send out of being a pop star. It's like a little figure, not me, being polystyrene, plastic, disposable. That's what pop star sort of meant to me, and so therefore I thought I might as well send it up.
Styrene was always separate from her contemporaries in outlook. While the punk thing was mostly nihilistic and dark, she personified positivity, as represented by her wardrobe. Unlike the identikit leather jackets and safety pins, Styrene designed her own clothes, and even had a store on punk mecca, the King's Road. Her creations a dizzying mix of plastic and neon. Styrene was a vivid burst of colour in the darkness, and the band's music reflected that. Punk did have this other image, which was destroy and I'm bored and no fun. Whereas we were fun. We were not bored, we had ideas. We were punk and energetic and fresh. But we were not destroy. We were positive. This would only add to X-Ray Spex' allure on stage. Their first show was at the Roxy on the 11th of March 1977, and already the group had written an era-defining anthem.
1, 2, 3, 4!
Oh Bondage Up Yours was inspired by a pair of buckled trousers Styrene had seen hanging in Vivienne Westwood's pivotal punk boutique, Seditionaires. For Styrene, this piece of clothing shone light on the enduring myth of Britain, or anywhere, being a free country, that there are always constraints and restrictions that are stopping you, chaining you down. But immediately, people thought the song had a much more risque subject matter in mind. Most people thought it was a kinky S&M song, but it was about breaking free from the bondage of the material world. I come from a religious background, and in the scriptures, the whole idea of being liberated is to break free from bondage. I had an idea of bondage of slavery and all those images in history, like the suffragettes or slaves being chained up. When I saw Vivienne Westwood's shop and all her bondage trousers, it symbolized all the other bondage elements I'd grown up with. The song starts with a dry chuckle, followed by Styrene encapsulating the song's thesis.
Some people think little girls should be seen and not heard, but I think, oh bondage, up yours!
Because of this introductory statement, many have leapt on the song as a key feminist text, and it is. But Styrene was targeting all social bondages, whether that be gender imbalance, consumerism, or addiction. She said to John Savage in 1992, it has that line in it. You are tied to these activities for someone else's profit. Musically, the song was the band at their most punk leaning, but nowhere near as fast as you remember. Stoogey chords chugged defiantly, while at the forefront dueled Logic's punchy atonal sax and Styrene's pivotal, full-bodied vocal. Said punk historian Vivian Goldman, everybody always talks about Oh Bondage Up Yours, because from the very first sound of Polly's voice, nothing could ever be the same. That sound cut through a sort of glass ceiling of what women singers could do with their voice. Girls hadn't been using those parts of their throats and lungs before. X-Ray Spex songs were mostly written by Styrene, her vocalizing the top line of the song, and the rest of the band composing music around that. Even in their earliest tunes, X-Ray Spex had actual dynamics. Fun little starts and stops that differentiated them from their all-fast, all-the-time contemporaries. For the band's second show, again at the Roxy, their performance of Oh Bondage Up Yours was recorded for posterity for the Roxy Live compilation, released in July 1977. The drummer dropped his sticks right at the beginning of the song, so the drum intro didn't work. Jack's guitar strap broke, and it's just me on the bass going dung da dung dung. And it just sounds rubbish. That's what they used on Live at the Roxy. Because of their first 3 shows, all at the Roxy, and the immediate reaction to the band from London's punk scene, X-Ray Spex were offered a residency at the Man in the Moon pub on the King's Road. This would help refine their live show, but it also gave the band opportunity to help out new and up-and-coming groups like Adam and the Ants, the Tourists and Rosillos by giving them their first London support shows. They also caught the attention of Richard Branson and his Virgin label, who signed the group for a one-off 7-inch, Oh Bondage Up Yours, backed by I Am a Cliché.
I'm cliché, live next door. I'm cliché, not mean. I'm cliché, king of scene.
Released on the 30th of September 1977, Oh Bondage Up Yours did not chart, hampered by BBC Radio's general rule not to play punk music, joined with its title being not fit for radio. But the pressing sold out, got the X-Ray Spex name out there, and earned the group some shows in New York at CBGB's. There winning over Debbie Harry, Richard Hell, and a young Thurston Moore. By the time they came back to the UK, X-ray specs were a big deal. Styrene, with her out-there fashion and cheerful demeanour, was one of the nation's favourite punks, her photos regularly appearing in the music weeklies and even the tabloids. More exposure meant more touring and more singles. Now signed to EMI, second single The Day the World Turned Dayglow made it to the UK Top 30 in April 1978. But the pressure to be the centre of attention was getting to her. You feel all the time that people are draining you, draining off your energy all the time until you think, blimey, I haven't got anything left to give. Leave me alone. As a reaction to the press and public probing and prodding into Styrene's life and appearance, not long after, while at John Lydon's flat, Styrene completely shaved her head. She would not be the last woman in music to do so, as a result of external pressure. Less than a month later, after a concert in Doncaster, Styrene began showing further signs of fatigue. I just looked out the window into the dark and I swear I saw it. It was a horrible big pink thing, a spacecraft making a load of noise. No one else saw it, so it couldn't have been real. I'd been smoking and reading a lot of funny things, and I hadn't slept or eaten for days. I must have been hallucinating. Fearing that her daughter was having a mental breakdown, Styrene's mother had polysectioned, where she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It would not be until 1991 where Styrene was recategorized as bipolar. But in 1978, she was told she would never be able to work again. She had just turned 21. Because of the miracles of pre-recorded performances, the first time she saw herself on Top of the Pops was from within her mental health facility. Next single, Identity, was released in July, again a top 30 hit. The reggae punk postmodern ballad Germ-Free Adolescence would follow in October and become their biggest hit, reaching number 19. Though some of the backing tracks had been recorded more than a year previous, because of Styrene's mental health and inability to properly promote it, their debut LP, Germ-Free Adolescence, wasn't released until November 1978. By this time, Styrene had tired of X-Ray Specs' punk rock sound and wanted to move in a more acoustic direction. The rest of the band didn't agree. A few months later, X-Ray Specs called it quits. Whilst dealing with her fraught mental health, Styrene would periodically release music throughout the rest of her life. She would die in 2011 of heart cancer. She was 53. Pretty much immediately, polystyrene and X-Ray Specs' influence was felt. Just like seeing the Sex Pistols had convinced Styrene that getting on stage without much musical grounding was possible. A generation of punk and new wave women saw X-Ray Specs and thought, that could be me. Her left-to-center look also helped in that, not being the traditional male fantasy of many other women that had appeared on Top of the Pops. The idea that just anyone could start a band was really big to me. That you could see people who are making records walking down the street, and they didn't necessarily have to be in a glossy magazine, and they didn't have to weigh 90 pounds and have blonde hair down to their ankles, or whatever was the fashion of the day. Pointedly, the Raincoat's fairy tale in the supermarket was in reference to Styrene's anti-consumerist takes. But many other musicians have taken on Styrene's shout-along mantle, whether it be the likes of Courtney Love, Andrea Zollo of Pretty Girls Make Graves, Beth Ditto of The Gossip, Karen O of Yeah Yeah Yeahs, or Victoria Ruiz and Mary Regalado of the Downtown Boys, not to mention being wholly responsible for the 90s Riot Girl movement. Bikini Kill and Sleater Kinney would no doubt not exist without Oh Bondage Up Yours as a template. Not to mention their more modern disciples. But beyond merely the effect of polystyrene, X-Ray Spex' saxophone bludgeon punk had an audible impact on no waivers like Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, James Chance and the Contortions, and Sonic Youth. While on Germ-Free Adolescence, the band were doing punk reggae before The Clash, Slits and Ruts. And at the same time, the synth washes on Plastic Bag and Highly Inflammable predate Gary Newman's unlearned take on electronica. Neneh Cherry and FKA Twigs also adore the band's work. The former started singing because of polystyrene, and the latter considers Germ-Free Adolescence to be her favourite album. And it all started with Oh Bondage, Up Yours, a rallying cry that made women feel seen, resulting in generations of women making themselves heard. Thanks for watching. What's your favourite girl punk anthem? Comment down below and like, subscribe and hit that bell. If you like my videos, why not check out my Patreon and perhaps donate $1 or $2 to help me continue making videos. Every little helps. A big shout out to my new top tier supporters, Shara Lev, Curtis Hovey and Dougie Boy. Thanks a bunch and I'll see you in 2 weeks for something entirely different.